Let's start by talking about the UK. You were here for the BAFTAs last night. You're on your way to the National Film and Television School. In that list of 190 countries, America is number one. Where's Britain?
Right up there. we don't like to rank them out there because it's really important, I think, that we treat each of the places we're at as home. So we have a great office here in London filled with creative people, and it's hard for people to wrap their head around, but when we do projects in the UK, they're very British. And the intent of our programming in the UK is to be very British. It's fantastic when they connect and you have an adolescent or a baby reindeer and it becomes a global phenomenon. But the goal was for it to be very British.
What's the thinking behind your donation to the National Film and Television School? Where are you heading after this?
Well, we're early supporters. It's an amazing program. As you know, as the UK became very active in the film incentive, basically putting AV at the center of the economy here, which is exciting. It became very evident there wasn't enough people in the industry who had the skills to support the levels of production that wanted to come. So the early on was let's plant some seeds and get more skilled crews in the UK and give people some opportunity that may not have had it in the past.
It's interesting.
It's been and by the way, it's been a model for other programs around the world since it's opened.
It's interesting you say you want your shows here to be British because there are people here in the TV industry, more so perhaps than the 20 million or so subscribers you've got, who feel a bit threatened by you. So just a few weeks ago, the BBC's former Director General, you know him well, Tony Hall, wrote a piece in The Guardian with the headline, "The BBC tells the story of Britain in a way that Netflix cannot." And it's worth saying, he was very much at pains to say how much he loves your shows.
Yes, it was very nicely done.
It was a very nice, it was a very flattering article. But he did write, the truth is and this is Tony Hall's words, the truth is what streamers like Netflix, Amazon or Apple are making is content that works on an international scale. And the total number of hours they make about the UK is not in the tens of thousands that the public service broadcasters produce. Why do you think there are so many people in the TV industry here, while full of admiration for you, feel somewhat threatened by you?
Success, I think, brings some of that. I think it's an interesting observation, but like I said, our teams here are 100% British. The writers and directors and creators of these programming are all British. This isn't like an American coming in trying to do something with a British accent, and so I'm always taken aback by that claim a little bit. Right now we have 59 productions happening here in the UK. Only about 17 or so are are non-British projects that are filming here. So I think our level of commitment both to the creative community in the UK is unchallenged, and I don't think we're trying to reshape what it is to be British. These are stories that I think may have fallen through the cracks. Some that have been able to find a very big audience, which gives us the courage to take some big swings and do things that are slightly unconventional. I think Adolescence was a good example of that, but Baby Reindeer probably even more so in terms of, a very British story, not right up the middle by any stretch. And I think, Jack Thorne, what he did with Adolescence is like that too, which is an incredibly British story, a very bold way to tell a story. And I think people connected to it in a way, not because it was or wasn't British, but in the UK, I think people definitely because it was British.
I was going to say they had very British casts and crews as well. But there's a flip side to this, which is that maybe one aspect of your success and what's happening in the industry more broadly has led to this huge inflation. And you're a very rich company, you've been very successful, you're rich because there's lots of people that like what you do. But because there's this inflation in budgets, there's an argument that some people make here, which is that crowds out UK shows and UK television. So a committee of MPs said last year that major streamers should commit to pay 5% of their UK subscriber revenue into a cultural fund to help finance drama with British audiences in mind. Is that unreasonable?
Look, I think that this business is very economically sound. I think incentive works much better than obligation, and I think that the UK has benefited greatly from the incentive to produce here versus and having a lot of obligation, making it more difficult to produce somewhere can override the economic benefits of the incentive. So in general, what I'd say is there is some equilibrium in entertainment. Many things get made at various budgets at different levels of intimacy with the crowd, and I think that you find so many buyers here. BBC and ITV and broadcast is still about a third of all viewing in the UK. So it's not like it's been crowded out. I think
There used to be,
there
used to be a lot more. So maybe they feel the loss rather acutely. And what they would say is, would Netflix? And you hear this very often. You've heard it many times, and you hear it from influential people like Peter Kosminski, who say, would Netflix make a Wolf Hall? Would Netflix make a Mr. Bates versus the Post Office?
I would have made it in a heartbeat. I'm shocked that people use that, especially that example. Mr. Bates was phenomenal. I wish we'd have made it.
Okay, let's talk about this Paramount deal. It's worth saying, lots of people around the world like your company very much, so much so they pay you every month. If your bid for Warner Brothers is successful, those people will get more shows. Just set out your argument as to why, the argument you made to Warner Brothers and indeed President Trump, why should they do a deal with you rather than Paramount?
Well, look, I think it's a long list of reasons, but at the end of the day, it's a business transaction, so you have to come up with the best deal. And that's a process we're still in. We ultimately had the best offer. They accepted. They recommended to their board that they approved the deal. Recently, we opened up a 7-day window for them to revisit the ongoing Paramount deal, mostly because Paramount was continuing to try to disrupt this deal, but in ways that were not clear. So just mostly confusing to the Warner Brothers shareholders. So I said, take 7 days, figure out what your deal is, make sure that what's committed and what isn't committed, and then we'll assess it from there. But I would say the reason why you would do a Netflix deal versus this Paramount deal, our deal is growth. We've been growing and growing and growing this business since we started. We've been like in the UK, we've spent $6 billion on original programming in the UK since 2020. We have created 50,000 jobs in this economy. So in the other model, in the Paramount model, it's the classic horizontal media mergers that are always bad for consumers, always bad for creators, because basically what they're just taking is 2 studios and collapsing them to one. There's 5 major studios left in Hollywood. If the Paramount deal were to go through, it would be 4.
It's ironic you say that, because when you read all of the reporting into this deal, there's often this narrative that Paramount represents a kind of nostalgic, romantic ideal of old Hollywood, and here comes Netflix, the disruptor, who's the enemy of the cinema world. And it's interesting, this isn't necessarily just Paramount paranoia, because people like James Cameron, who's an icon of cinema, you must know him very well, was moved to write to the chair of the Senate Antitrust Subcommittee and say, and I quote him, this is James Cameron, "I believe strongly that the proposed sale of Netflix, to Netflix, will be disastrous for the theatrical motion picture business I've dedicated my life's work to." I mean, that's got to hurt.
I have no, you know what? It doesn't hurt. I would say it was quite confusing. I had personally met with James on December 20th, and we talked through our commitment to 45-day theatrical exclusivity for the Warner Brothers slate.
It's about protecting cinemas, which he cares about.
Yeah, of course. And that's what he does. That's all he does. And if you look at it and say, and I told him, we spent 5 minutes of our conversation on that. And we talked mostly about these glasses that he's developing for Meta to watch movies at home. So to have him come out with such an impassioned statement seemed disingenuous.
So when he says the business model of Netflix is directly at odds with the theatrical film production and exhibition business.
Completely untrue. The best thing for our business is if people love movies and television. And the best way you love movies is to watch them at home, in the theaters, wherever you want to watch them. Think about yourself as a consumer. If you go out for the night, you buy a movie ticket, you see a movie, it blows your mind. When you come home, what's the next thing you want to do? Watch another movie. So for me, it's very important, and we don't lose any business to the movie theaters. In fact, like I said, if the more people see movies, the better, deeper, richer relationship they have with movies, and that's a good thing. And I think, by the way, it feeds both ways. That an average Netflix member watches 7 movies a month. An average person, this is U.S., but an average person in the U.S. goes to the cinema twice a year. So this is the lifeblood of this economy, and I think people, I know they're very romantically attached to the idea of going to like a movie palace and the curtains opening and watching a movie with 2,000 people. But that's not exactly how people are experiencing movies.
I guess it's not a zero-sum game as well. You could have both in the same place.
No, I think 1 and 1 is 5 is what I believe, yeah.
When you paid Donald Trump a visit to speak to him directly about this deal, what was the argument you made to him?
The growth in the economy. This is a vertical merger. We're buying assets that we don't currently have. So we're buying a movie studio and a distribution entity that we don't currently have. We'll be adding to the market, where Paramount has committed that they're going to cut $6 billion out of the business right away. And then to delever that business after this deal closes, they would need to cut an additional $16 billion. So you look at that and think, wow, this industry will be much smaller under that ownership. than it would be under Netflix ownership.
You've got to deal with the world as it is, not as you'd like it to be, so you've got to be very diplomatic. But what is your response to what Mr. Trump said yesterday, calling for the sacking of Susan Rice, who's on your board?
Yeah, this is a business deal. It's not a political deal. This deal is run by the Department of Justice in the U.S. and regulators throughout Europe and around the world. And
it's quite weird, isn't it, for a president to be weighing in on this stuff?
Yeah, he likes to do a lot of things on social media.
So you have the First Amendment. We've got highly regulated broadcast media here. We've also got very aggressive newspapers. And you'll know that recently in this country there was a big ruckus over the idea of Abu Dhabi's royal family owning a part of the Daily Telegraph through this group called Redbird Capital. Now, Redbird Capital are also involved in the Paramount deal on the other side of this negotiation. And if Paramount was successful, it would give them partial control over CNN and CBS, two news networks. Yeah. Do you think it's wrong in principle for foreign governments to have any sort of financial ownership of news networks?
I think it's a bad idea, typically. So to have several sovereign wealth funds in that Paramount deal. Again, a part of the world that is not very big on the First Amendment. So to even come up with this idea that they're not going to have any editorial control or it seems very odd to me with the level of investment that we're talking about that they'd have no influence or editorial control over media in another country.
And to be clear, if Paramount come in later today and say we have got an improved offer, are you prepared to increase your offer?
Look, I don't want to do hypotheticals, so this is part of the process. We very much like the deal where we're at right now. We're very disciplined buyers, and we always have been. So I think this is a spectacular opportunity at a price, and we have to figure out what that price. This is all a process of price discovery.
Okay. Well, we're very committed to fairness, so I should say that if David Ellison would like to come on this program and make the case of Paramount, we'd be delighted to hear from him. Let's talk about.
He didn't come see you when he was here. He was here in the UK, didn't see.
No, but the invitation's just been.
I wouldn't have missed this. I wouldn't have.
It'd be a great show. Let's talk about the wider industry. Is YouTube now your main rival, more so than any other streaming service?
Well, look, we've identified YouTube as a competitor 10 years ago. If you go back and look at all of our earnings calls and our public announcements, we've always identified YouTube as a potential competitor. In the last several years, they've become much more meaningful. Here in the UK, as you know, they're growing faster than everybody else. About 55% of all YouTube watching is now on the television. It's not on your phone. It's not on your laptop. So it is clearly a television competitor. And remember, that's a zero-sum game. The time that you spend on a connected TV, if you're watching one app, you're not watching broadcast, you're not watching BBC, you're not watching ITV, and you're not watching any other streaming service, including Netflix. So when you look at that, you'd say, of course, this is the landscape, and they are today about close to 9% of television time in the UK. And what surprises me all the time is the studios and the networks around the world, including the BBC, actually, are just continue to feed them free programming, but of course they're growing so fast, and then people will make an argument whether or not it's television. It is literally television. So in other words, I actually think there's a great opportunity. What this says is it's a recognition that consumers change their habits, the way how people watch, how young people watch, particularly because it'll influence the next several decades of television. But I think that there is probably a better distribution relationship than just turning over your content and making pennies on the dollar.
Talk about those new habits. Let's talk about podcasts. When I interviewed you in 2019, I asked why you weren't going to go into live sports, and you said, I love live sports. My question is just always, what's the best way to spend the next 10 billion? You've since then moved into live sports, and you've also moved into podcasts. So you got Gary Lineker's The Rest is Football during the World Cup. But how do you see podcasts in the Netflix future?
So I actually think podcasts are just an extension of
chat shows.
It's the new generation of chat shows where you don't have to make one show that appeals to everybody. The way, I grew up with Johnny Carson, 45 million people used to watch the show every night. But we're now with podcasts where you do have a much more passionate, but often smaller, more specialized audience. And you can support hundreds or thousands of them. I think there's 1 million podcasts now, literally around the world.
Some better than others.
Yes, I agree.
But they come with a back catalogue which can be refreshed every single week, and they're pretty low to produce, low cost.
Yeah, and again, which lowers the expectation and the need for to make the audience bigger and broader all the time.
So, do you think podcasts will be an increasingly big part of your future? Because Simon Cornwell, the exec producer behind The Night Manager, who we spoke to recently, said that the future of television is very expensive and very cheap. It's going to kind of bifurcate in that way. Yeah. Is that your sense?
It's likely something like that, but obviously I think what it is just when people have a lot of choices, you could support a broad variety of genres and formats and ambitions, actually. And I think in the world of where YouTube is growing in engagement, they're not really investing much, in people. So the creators have to make their own choices, then have to put up their own money. And if it connects, there might be some money back in the form of revenue share of the advertising. But it ends at the end of the day, ends up being pennies on the dollar to the industry. So I think it's in total, it could be a much more diverse industry. But I also think that people flee to quality and look for kind of ambitious storytelling. But I think that more things can exist on television because of these new kind of direct-to-consumer models.